Hello, my name's Osha. Uh, it's March the 20th, 2023, and it's 3 weeks since uh, a joint US Israeli decapitation strike on Iran's leadership plunged us into an illegal and unnecessary war with Iran. Now, earlier, I'd done a video, just expressing uh, some, you know, joy at least that the president had said he would not be putting American boots on ground and there wouldn't be an invasion. But, again, by the next day, at least by today, there are indications again that uh, there might be boots on the ground, that the president is contemplating that. I don't know. So messaging has been very mixed in this war. Um, and that this is something that's been very unclear. What's the purpose? What's the goal of America in, prosecuting war against Iran? Is it regime change? Again, that is illegal, right? It's illegal under international law. Even if it's a regime change, clearly that has not succeeded. And US intelligence has indicated that, that there's no risk of regime collapse in Iran. So, um, but at least recently, I learned from the news that Marines had been deployed. Now going on, it's going to be an aggregate of about 5,000 U.S. Marines being deployed. Sent over to the theater, to the Middle East, possibly to resolve um, the stranglehold exerted by Iran on the Strait of Hormuz, which has, of course, impacted the global economy. Of course, I've talked about how Iran's, counterattack to the joint U.S.-Israeli aggression would be to fight not in a conventional manner because it will be suicidal for Iran. They know uh, America clearly has the strongest military in the world, and they have the capability to resoundingly defeat um, Iran. So, however, in choosing uh, to defend itself, its counterattack would be through asymmetric warfare, and this is what it's done quite, effectively by attacking the um, global economy first by hitting the GCC countries, hitting their refineries and things like that. Um, Recently, Israel struck at Iran's South Pars liquefied natural gas facilities. And of course, Iran counterattacked by hitting Qatar's oil, gas facilities as well. It's oil and gas facilities. Um, Now, following that, we noticed some kind of incipient fissures in the alliance between the U.S. and Israel, at least between Donald Trump and um, Benjamin Netanyahu, as President Trump, indicated his irritation at saying that, you know, um, he had no intent. He was against Israel actually striking the South Pars facilities of Iran. And there are indications President Trump would like to end this, because of the adverse economic impact that the that Iran's asymmetric sort of warfare, basically attacking the economy and GCC countries, instead of just relying on a conventional military combat, which it can't necessarily win against America. Um, you know, so the economy is hitting us globally, right? And we're finding that even our allies are not keen on joining the United States. Many of them, they've outright declined, uh, to assist the United States, including NATO. And, you know, in terms of the economy, all the price of oils appears to have gone past $112 per barrel, which is a huge jump. At some point at the beginning of the year, oil was hovering between 60 and 60, in the mid 60s. At some point, maybe it was at 70 or 73 a barrel prior to the conflict, immediately prior to the conflict. But this is a significant jump at over $112 a barrel. The stock market has, since its high on February 10, 2026, prior to the conflict, it's done 9.7% drop, right? The stock market went below 46,000 today, went under 46,000. So we're approaching 10%, drop in the stock market since the onset of hostilities. And again, once it hits 20%, we can say technically we're in a recession. So it's just been going down precipitously, and it's cost the U.S. $1 billion a day to prosecute this war, and it's been limited. If there is, if there's going to be a ground invasion, one of the things that the U.S. military would do, and this is unclassified information, right? They would typically send the Marines. That's what the Marines is there for. They would send the Marines first of all as an amphibious, right, unit. They go. So that's why the Marines have the toughest training of all the armed forces in the U.S. military. They would go and try and prepare everything, clear what it is they can clear to prepare for an armed invasion, a full-on, armed invasion. There are indications that, they have limited operations, that the objective is to actually take control of Karg Island, right? Which is, where the main oil facilities of Iran are located. But with that, so that they can sort of manage and resolve the Strait of Hormuz crisis. But with that, I don't, the Iranians will continue to retaliate, right? They'll continue to fire missiles, and that's just going to be endangering the lives of American soldiers, because Iranians will continue to be able to fire missiles from their locations. Um, Iranians clearly have more weapons deep underground in the mountains, and again, Iranian terrain is different from Iraq or Afghanistan. They're protected within a fortress, like a natural geographic fortress by mountains, the Zagros Mountains and the Albers, the Albers ranges. So they're protected like within a fortress. This has provided, they've had historical protection since the time of the Romans, against the Romans, and so they're going to use this to good effect. And remember, another reason I keep saying, well, there shouldn't be any ground invasion, is because without a doubt, the regime will use chemical and biological weapons on invaders, right? It's unfair. American soldiers should not be subjected to that. They're going to fight a guerrilla warfare. Their neighbors are surrounded by neighbors that can provide them support, where they can flee to if it's necessary. If in the event that they somehow can be forced out of their protection in the mountains, they can always take refuge and disappear because they'll just prepare themselves for long term guerrilla warfare, right? They have support from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from all these, the surrounding areas, right? They have support from these places. Um, the notion, that what is the goal of the U.S., right? Because U.S. goals are clearly different from Israeli goals. If the objective is to balkanize um, Iranians, it hasn't happened in what, thousands of years. Um, I think it's a pipe dream to assume that these clusters, it's a multi-ethnic nation, and of course Persians are the majority. But you'll find that I understand how nations within a multi-ethnic environment, right, are often misconstrued by outsiders, that somehow they can easily divide and rule them, right? Because I'm from a multi-ethnic nation, and I know that Nigerians can wrangle amongst themselves while they're there, but once a foreign and external invader comes against them, you'll see Nigerians united against that external force. And Iranians have done this for thousands of years, right? They've done this for a very long time. It's the same thing as in America, right? Um, People who think they can get Black Americans, marginalized groups um, to um, to sabotage or undermine the United States government in the event of war or an invasion. They're mistaken, right? You see, Black Americans, are the most faithful people in the United States military. They're going to be with them. They're going to fight against a foreign aggressor. Black Americans, other minorities as well. So we unite against a foreign aggressor, right? And we saw this also in Russia when Napoleon went to invade, on his suicidal invasion of Russia in 1812. Then Russians had this society where they had serfs. Serfs are equivalent of slaves, right? So it was probably assumed that these slaves would rise up against the aristocrats, right, who were the military people. But it didn't happen, right? It didn't happen. The serfs were united with the military. Then the aristocrats, Russians, were one, and they united against the French invaders. And the French invaders, you know, they eventually lost the war. They were sent back in shame, right? Napoleon went into Russia with 600,000 soldiers. He defeated the Russians in the Battle of Borodino, but instead of surrendering, the Russian forces retreated, burned down Moscow, and continued to retreat into the cold. And eventually, the French, um, the winter dealt with them, and of course the Russians used scorched earth policy, right? A scorched earth tactic in which they burned everything behind them. They burned all the food, the agriculture, the farmlands, so that the French wouldn't have any food to survive. And the French died of starvation, cannibalism. They were eating their horses, eating their boots, their leather. They died from the cold, the torturous cold of winter of Russia. Napoleon ended up leaving with just 30,000 troops, right? Left Russia with just 30,000. And that was the beginning of the end of his empire. And I'm hoping, the reason I keep, I'm very concerned is that America, with our yes, we have this great military prowess, this military might. And many people keep talking about, how we have the strongest military in the world. But America, we fought battles in which a comparatively lesser force ended up defeating us, right? in Vietnam. In Vietnam, this happened. So uh, a wittier, smaller military force that has the resolve and the resilience and the intelligence can end up defeating us if we, do not immediately uh, cut our losses and decide we're not going to throw good money after bad money, right? We need to withdraw from um, from Iran. Otherwise, we're walking into a trap, an obvious trap in Iran. They're going to be walking into an obvious trap. Um, a reason, I recall a story that I loved so much as a kid. It's an old English fable, Jack and the Beanstalk. It's very famous, Jack and the Beanstalk. I think that you can find there's probably cartoon versions, right? And the stories of Jack, a very poor boy, very poor, extremely poor boy, and in his battle, in how he ended up defeating this giant that obviously was a child eater, right? It was a monster that ate children, and he could easily eat Jack, right? Defeat Jack easily. However, um, Jack had allies. America's been alienating its allies. America doesn't have allies anymore, right? All we have is Israel. We don't have allies supporting us. Iran has allies that it has not yet used. Russia, China, and of course its proxies, right? Its proxies, in Yemen, in Iraq, in different parts, right? It's a network of jihadists or whatever militants. It's them not mislabel. Not going to mislabel. Downgrade Islam or anything. Anyway, it has its militant groups, right, that are ready to assist it, right? So Jack, let me tell the story. So Jack, anyway, this let me quickly state the lesson of the story, the morale of the story. The the giant was clearly superior in strength, right? In strength and resources to Jack. But Jack was nimble, was sagacious, and fortunately, Jack had allies that were helping Jack, right? And that included the giant's own wife, who constantly hid Jack, right? And Jack eventually led um, the unrestrained giant to self-destruct by unwittingly pursuing Jack into this trap that Jack had set for Jack. When and it led to the giant's death. And so a a power that an entity, a mighty force, a force that has power should be judicious, should be sagacious, and know how to use their power. Otherwise, it's going to be counterproductive. It can be used against them, right? It can be used against them. So let me tell the story and end this. And um, in any event, I'm hoping America we learn that it's not every fight we must fight. It's not every battle we must engage in simply because we are the strongest. We have the strongest military in the world, right? That military costs us a lot of money, and it can end up becoming an albatross on our necks, right? Um, so it's not every battle we must engage in. It's not every war we have to fight. And we have to know when to stop fighting, right? We have to know when it's not appropriate, when we have more to lose than to gain. I don't see what we have to gain in Iran, right? We don't have anything to gain in Iran, nothing at all. hardly, or it will be insignificant compared to the sacrifices, to the loss. Because right now, our position in the world, our strength, that's what's being challenged. Because one, we're taking a huge hit that we don't have to economically, financially, and that can be a destroyer of empires, right? Of great powers. It's happened many times before. There's already been the damage to our reputation, the international outcry against America, right? It is terrible what we've done. So, in any event, I'm going to just tell the story. It's a very interesting story. I loved it so much as a child. So, Jack, of course, was a poor boy. He and his mother lived with his mother, and his mother had sent him into town to sell some of their cows. However, he came across this mysterious old man, and he exchanged the cows for some magical beans. The mysterious man gave Jack. Overnight, the beans would grow into a giant, you know, stalk that reached into this giant stalk, reached into the clouds, reached into the sky. So Jack climbed up and discovered the castle of a giant with his wife, and so but he was fortunate, the when the giants came around, the giants, the giant's wife hid Jack, right? So the giant had a hen that laid golden eggs, had a number of things, riches, had a magical harp, right? A magical harp that could just sing on its own, right? So when the giant came around, the wife hid Jack, right? She'd fed him and she hid Jack. So the giant would count his money, and when he finished counting he would count his gold. When he finished, he'd go to sleep. So, but Jack made away with a bag of gold and took it down. So Jack would go back up again, and then this time he went to go and steal the hen that laid the golden eggs, right? And then the third time he went up again, and then he stole the magical harp. But as he was escaping, the giant caught Jack, and the giant was running after Jack. So as Jack was running, he ran down because the harp started to sing, started to shout, and so the giant was now running after Jack, running after Jack. So Jack had set a trap, right? Jack was running down because Jack was nimble, was quicker, so the giant couldn't catch Jack, right? So Jack was now climbing down, back down the stalk that came from the clouds, where the residence of the castle of the giant was. So it was climbing down the stalk, but the mother started to cut down, helped Jack and cut down the stalk as the giant was climbing down as well. This huge giant was climbing down the stalk. Didn't realize that Jack and his mother were setting a trap for him, and so they started to chop, 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 and they chopped down the stalk, and the giant fell and died. So that's the story of Jack, and how Jack, a small boy without the strength, but had the wits, outwitted a giant, and got the giant um, to plunge itself to its death. So I'm hoping America does not act like that giant that doesn't think, where it doesn't think, it's just very consumed in self engrossed about its power, its military might, how destructive it is, without realizing that a smaller power, a small being that doesn't have its power can outwit it and set a trap that will destroy a bigger power like America. And going into Iran, in an invasion of Iran, will be America walking straight into the trap that Iran has set for America, a bigger power, just like Jack, right? Set a trap um, for the Giants. If the Giants had decided to just stay, right, and not pursue Jack, let Jack just climb back down and cut. the stock, Jack would never come back and torment the giants, right? The giants would still be alive. So there are times when a mighty power must understand it shouldn't act. It should restrain itself, right, and not waste its efforts and fall into a trap of a smaller power that's that's scheming with others to destroy that mighty power. If you take a look at what's going on right now, um, America's those that are supposed to be America's allies are coming out now not as allies, and with the fissures between America and Israel, how long is that alliance going to last? So America should not shoot itself in the foot and continue in this ill-advised war that doesn't benefit the American people. That's only an albatross um, on the neck of the American people. In any event, my name is Olurotimi Osha, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.